The gavel struck sharply in courtroom number 3. No one moved, no shifting chairs, no quiet coughs, just a thick silence hanging in the air like someone had pulled a string tight across a guitar but refused to let it sound. On the defendant's bench sat a man in a light gray suit. He sat upright, chin slightly lifted, his eyes cold and calm. Royce Maddox, a seasoned officer with 17 years on the force, known for clean results and no questions asked. Today, he sat there like he was merely waiting for a procedural formality to pass. No worry, no hesitation, just a faint, smug curl at the corner of his mouth. Behind him, the gallery was packed with people from the department. Patrol officers, detectives, internal affairs, reps, legal advisors, all sitting still. But the strange thing was, their eyes were not on the defendant. They were on the door. No one said anything, but the whole room froze like someone had pressed pause on a movie simply because one person had just walked in. Combat boots, a crisp white shirt buttoned to the top, hair pulled back into a tight bun, no makeup, posture as straight as a steel rod. It was her. The black woman Maddox, once handcuffed in the middle of the street, face pinned to the sidewalk with no legal justification. Labeled disruptive resisting arrest, non-compliant. Called a loud black woman. But today, she was not here to reclaim her dignity. She was here to end it all. She walked slowly, steadily, no glances to the side, no escort. She did not greet anyone, did not smile. But when she placed the folder on the plaintiff's table, the entire courtroom seemed to drop like someone had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. It was not out of respect. It was because they knew this woman, the one they once beat down in the street, just walked in like she was ready to flip the whole system on its head. 3 weeks ago, the Edgewater neighborhood in South Toledo was as quiet as it had always been, a forgotten patch of land, wedged between major roads and inner-city checkpoints. Patrol cars rolled by twice a day, not to protect, but to monitor. Around here, no one called the police when trouble came, because they either would not show up in time, or worse, they would show up and make things even worse. Naomi Brooks lived on the second floor of an old building on 16th Street, right in the heart of Edgewater, a neglected fringe of Toledo. Below her apartment was a 24-hour convenience store. Next door was an ancient laundromat where no machine worked on time. Every morning she appeared at exactly 7:15, bought black coffee with no sugar at the corner shop, then returned to her apartment, quietly, always carrying a folder of documents. Nobody paid attention. The local clerks called her Mrs. Brooks. A few were blunt. "That black lady is weird. Never talks to anyone, just walks around looking at stuff." But no one knew that before she moved here, Naomi was a legend in special forces. She once held the rank of lieutenant colonel in a tactical command unit in the Middle East, leading more than 30 high-risk missions. She had been everywhere dangerous, from Mosul to Helmand. Her name had once been engraved on the Wall of Honor at Fort Bragg. She was the sole survivor of an ambush operation and the one who had made the impossible decision to sacrifice 3 soldiers in order to save 25 others. She never spoke of any of that, never kept the medals, never hung up the commendations. The day she left the service, Naomi packed everything into a wooden box, sealed it, shipped it to her mother, and never brought it up again. After her younger brother Ezra was shot and killed during a botched house raid in Cleveland, Naomi left the military just 3 months later. She did not go on the news, did not file lawsuits, did not make a scene. But anyone who had known Naomi on the battlefield understood when she goes quiet, it means she is counting every single step. Naomi chose this neighborhood, not because it was poor, but because it held the same kind of silence she had known in the barracks. A place where no one cared who you were as long as you did not cause trouble. And she did not want trouble, at least not for anyone who left the vulnerable alone. Inside her small apartment, Naomi provided free legal guidance for local residents, helping them read tickets, file appeals, and understand their rights when stopped by the police. No one knew how a woman with no law degree, no office, could understand every little detail of legal code so well. But those who had served with her knew Naomi had once been a strategic advisor in the Internal Legal Security Division of Special Forces. Her duties had gone far beyond battlefield command. She reviewed protocol violations, handled internal complaints, and worked with military legal teams on cross-jurisdiction cases. After leaving the service, she no longer held any official legal title, but her habit of studying the law and taking meticulous notes never faded. During her years in combat, she had protected the legal rights of her soldiers, and that taught her better than anyone that staying silent about the small wrongs only feeds the bigger injustices. And yet, they still came to her. Because she did not make promises, did not sugarcoat anything. She just helped them stand tall when it mattered most. To outsiders, she looked unremarkable. A middle-aged black woman in slacks and a perfectly pressed shirt, her hair always neatly tied back, and her face never cracking a smile. But what they did not see was the steel-trap memory behind that calm exterior. Naomi remembered every face of every officer ever mentioned in shady arrest reports. She remembered every gap in the surveillance footage. She even remembered the names of people whose identities were recorded incorrectly in summonses, tiny errors that could shift the outcome of an entire trial. She did not go looking for trouble, but when it came to her, she did not step aside. Naomi once told a neighbor, "I do not do anything big. I just do not let the small things slide, especially when they happen too often." She understood the slow siege tactics, the kind of ambushes that came from the shadows. But now she used those skills not to defeat an enemy, but to push lies out through the cracks in the legal system. Every day, Naomi walked through the neighborhood, moving slowly like an auntie out shopping for vegetables. But she noticed every crooked camera, every patrol car parked too long, every young black boy stopped in the street just for wearing a hoodie. She did not react immediately. She took notes. She watched, she waited, and then when the moment was right, she moved. No noise, no backup, just one woman, one case file, and one truth that could not be bent. Naomi Brooks, the quiet woman who lived in the last apartment at the end of the alley, had once been a legend in a place where there was no room for mistakes. And even though nobody saw her as a hero anymore, the precision in her footsteps was enough to make those who abused power begin to feel uneasy. They say that if you live long enough in a narrow, silent place, you start to hear the things everyone else ignores. Naomi knew that. She had lived in desert barracks where the tiniest sound in the middle of the night could signal an ambush. In Edgewater, silence did not mean war, but it concealed the chaos spreading day by day. And when she saw the signs repeating bit by bit like a string of pre-war signals, she understood this was not a coincidence. This was a system. To outsiders, she seemed completely ordinary. A middle-aged black woman dressed in slacks and a neatly pressed shirt, her hair always tied back her face, never showing even a hint of a smile. But what they could not see was the razor-sharp memory hidden behind that calm exterior. Naomi remembered every single face of every officer ever mentioned in questionable arrest reports. She remembered every gap in the surveillance footage. She even remembered the names of people whose identities were incorrectly recorded in summonses, tiny mistakes that could change the outcome of an entire trial. And in a world where justice could be derailed by a single, seemingly harmless detail, Naomi's memory was a quiet but powerful weapon. She did not go looking for trouble, but when it came to her, she did not step aside. Naomi once told a neighbor, "I do not do anything big. I just do not let the small things slide, especially when they happen too often." She understood the slow siege tactics, the kind of ambushes that came from the shadows. But now she used those skills not to defeat an enemy, but to push lies out through the cracks in the legal system. Every day Naomi walked through the neighborhood, moving slowly, like an auntie out shopping for vegetables. But she noticed every crooked camera, every patrol car parked too long, every young black boy stopped in the street just for wearing a hoodie. She did not react immediately. She took notes, she watched, she waited, and then, when the moment was right, she moved. No noise, no backup. Just one woman, one case file, and one truth that could not be bent. Naomi Brooks, the quiet woman who lived in the last apartment at the end of the alley, had once been a legend in a place where there was no room for mistakes. And even though nobody saw her as a hero anymore, the precision in her footsteps was enough to make those who abused power begin to feel uneasy. They say that if you live long enough in a narrow, silent place, you start to hear the things everyone else ignores. Naomi knew that. She had lived in desert barracks where the tiniest sound in the middle of the night could signal an ambush. In Edgewater, silence did not mean war, but it concealed the chaos spreading day by day. And when she saw the signs repeating bit by bit, like a string of pre-war signals, she understood this was not a coincidence. This was a system. It started with kids being stopped in the street for jaywalking. Then came the young men in hoodies, having their pockets searched without a warrant. Then black women being asked for identification at the grocery store just because they did not look right. All of it happened within a few blocks of where Naomi lived. All of it ended with the same line subject cooperated and was released due to lack of evidence. Naomi did not ignore those reports. She visited every home of those who had been stopped knocking on doors with a cup of tea and a slip of paper in hand. She did not press or interrogate. She simply said, "If you feel something was wrong, tell me. Your name will not go anywhere if you do not want it to." Some shut the door right away. Some hesitated, but many spoke. And as she recorded each detail, the time of arrest, the words exchanged the officer's behavior, how it ended, a map began to form in her mind. And at the center of that map, one name stood out most: Maddox, Lieutenant Royce Maddox, 41 years old, head of patrol for District 5. Previously awarded for maintaining order in high-conflict areas, known for being firm and uncompromising toward resistance, and within internal circles, known as the man who knew how to make things disappear on paper. Naomi noticed that nearly every arrest lacking solid evidence had his signature, or that of someone from his team. No one at the department said a word about it. They did not need to. In a place where fast, clean quiet was more valued than right, people like Maddox always survived and always stayed as long as they did not make noise. But Naomi did not care about reputation or cover. She cared about the numbers. And the numbers did not lie. Over 7 months, she tracked 29 warrantless stops, 14 instances where surveillance footage went missing at the exact time of an altercation, and 11 victims who refused to talk out of fear of being harassed again. In many incident reports, police statements had uncanny similarities, as if copied and pasted subject showed signs of agitation, suspicion of carrying an unidentified object, displayed uncooperative behavior. But when Naomi cross-checked locations, times, leftover footage, and patrol maps, she found most incidents occurred between 7 o'clock in the evening and 10 o'clock at night, the same time frame when Maddox usually led patrols. Even more suspicious was that the neighborhood surveillance cameras, normally functioning, often reported technical errors right when people were detained. Naomi asked a former contact, a data security engineer, to retrieve system logs. The results showed 13 instances of camera cutoffs, all originating from one access point and internal control from the city's own network, but with no specific personnel tagged. To avoid being flagged, Naomi and the engineer never access live systems. They used archived backup data made public through the city's civil audit portal, typically delayed by 24 to 72 hours. As a citizen, Naomi filed Freedom of Information Act requests for video records of disputed incidents. Because she filed each case separately, no one noticed the bigger picture being stitched together. They also used encryption software and a virtual private network to ensure all data traces went through out-of-state intermediary servers. Naomi never touched classified systems. She relied solely on what the system had left behind: oversights, conflicting records, and gaps no one expected someone to care about. Naomi did not hand this evidence to journalists. She did not leak it to the press. She silently organized it into folders, color-coded and chronologically filed. She did not want attention. She had seen truths blown wide open only to vanish like they never existed. She wanted each move to remain quiet until it landed exactly where it needed to. And then came one case that left her no choice but to act immediately. It happened on a Thursday evening, the sky dimming, though the streetlights had not fully kicked in. Naomi was walking back from the community center at the corner of 15th Street and Grant Avenue when she saw a group of officers pinning a young man against the wall. He wore a gray hoodie, had his hair tied up and narrow shoulders. 4 officers, 2 held his arms. 1 searched his pockets. The last one spoke while scribbling in a notepad. None of them noticed the woman standing 10 steps away in the shadows. Naomi did not move forward. She stood still, hit record, tucked her phone into the front of her shirt, and then she heard one officer say, "What were you trying to tag, huh? You know this is a security zone. You know, all I have to say is you raised your hand too fast and I get to shoot, right?" The boy stammered, "I was just holding a marker. I was not doing anything." Pages flipped. A boot scuffed the pavement. Someone snorted. A few minutes later, the officers left without filing a report. The boy lingered, then ran off. Naomi stopped the recording and walked straight home without a word. The next day, she met with Malik. The boy from the incident handed him a copy of the audio file and said, "If you ever need this, keep it. For now, just live your life." In the nights that followed, Naomi barely slept. Not out of fear, but because her mind would not stop working. She kept piecing together evidence from home camera footage, questionable police reports, to anonymous tips sent to a separate inbox she had set up for this purpose. Some nights, she woke at 3 o'clock in the morning just to redraw patrol maps. Each detail was hand-drawn, then scanned to mark connections. And the deeper she dug, the clearer it became. This was not a few rogue officers. This was a structure sustained by silence. She began asking questions. Why were the cameras malfunctioning only on the blocks where people got stopped? Why was there no incident report? Why were the detainees never brought to court but only given a verbal warning and released? And most of all, why was no one in the department asking these questions? One afternoon, Naomi quietly visited Malik's mother. The woman was cautious at first, but when she realized Naomi had helped save her son, her eyes welled up. "I used to think it was safer to stay quiet," she said. "But now I know if people like you do not speak up, we are just fish on a cutting board." That line left Naomi speechless. Not because she was emotional, but because it confirmed what she already knew: what she was doing mattered. Not for herself, but for those who could not protect themselves. She was not a victim. She was not a hero. She was a former soldier now using discipline and focus to fight an enemy with no face abuse of power, hidden by bureaucracy. Thomas, her partner in the case, also saw that this had become bigger than a single arrest. "If you are ready," he said, "we can expand the investigation. But we have to accept digging deeper comes with real risk." Naomi replied, "I have lived through battlefields. At least there, people admit the guns are real. Here, silence is the most dangerous weapon. From that day, they divided the work. Naomi continued gathering civilian statements and evidence. Thomas connected with a human rights legal team to prepare for a case at the federal level. Neither of them rushed. They knew a case won by headlines could be silenced, but a case built on undeniable evidence could not. Over time, Naomi received more anonymous emails. Some were thank you notes, some were threats, but some were gold like snapshots of altered internal memos or audio of two officers discussing cleaning things up before the federal auditors get here. Naomi never reacted immediately. She stored everything, encrypted it, and backed it up on 3 separate hard drives, one at home, one at a law office, and one with a friend who worked in internal oversight in Washington, D.C. She also activated a simple but effective failsafe for every threat received. Naomi logged the timestamp contact information and suspicious location, then sent it to a dummy email set to auto-forward if untouched for 7 days. It was her way of telling anyone watching silencing her would only make the truth travel faster. She sent a condensed version of the case file to 3 investigative journalism organizations, with one note: do not publish if I am still replying to this email. Those scattered copies became her silent armor and a warning to anyone thinking they could make her disappear. She knew that if things spun out of control, at least the truth would survive. Exactly 1 month after Malik's incident, Naomi completed her second full case file. This time it was not just one case, it was 6 back-to-back with overlapping evidence too consistent to be chance. 6 incidents, 6 victims, 6 times the cameras just happened to break, and all under Maddox's patrol team. And now the moment was near. All it would take was one more mistake. One more time he thought no one was watching. One more time he believed, like always, that he would get away. Saturday night. No moon, no wind. Just the eerie stillness of a city pretending to sleep. The streetlights cast a yellow haze over rain-slick pavement, like sweat seeping from the ground. Naomi drove slowly through 18th Street, the site of a wrongful arrest just a week before. She had just left a 4-hour community meeting exhausted but sharp. As always, her dashcam was on. A habit built from too many times when people were not believed because they had no proof. She did not know the black car parked 2 blocks away had been waiting. No lights, no siren. Just a silent engine rolling out of the shadows as she turned right. As the green light faded, red lights suddenly flashed behind her. She glanced at the rearview mirror, calmly unhooked her phone from the mount, and opened a preset app. One tap, and the camera would stream live to an out-of-state server. The patrol car closed in from the left, like a predator locking onto prey. Naomi understood immediately when the beam lit up her mirror. She pulled over, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the wheel, the practiced movements of someone who knew how to stay safe in an unfair situation. Her window rolled down just enough to talk. The man in uniform stepped forward, flashlight in hand, not to see, but to intimidate, shining it straight into her eyes. "Step out of the car." His voice was calm but loaded like a spring ready to snap. "What is the reason?" Naomi asked, eyes locked on the light. "Step out now." This time, nothing else. In the brief glare across the mirror, Naomi saw the face. Royce Maddox, the man named in too many testimonies. The man always present when the law twisted in the name of order. She did not argue. She exhaled quietly and opened the door. The moment her feet hit the pavement, her arms were yanked back without warning. The handcuffs snapped shut with the cold finality of old metal in a boot camp. "Do not move. I am not resisting," Naomi said calmly, like reciting a familiar report. "Do not remind me of the rules." Maddox replied, lowering his voice, then spitting out, "Knowing a few laws does not make you special." Naomi was slammed against the car, the cold metal printing against her cheek. Her head knocked lightly on the glass, just a dull thud, a small sound that rang loud in the silence. Blood seeped from the gash on her forehead, warm and steady, sliding past her brow and down her white collar. She did not scream, did not flinch, did not look away. It was not submission. It was survival, something learned on real battlefields, where silence became your strongest witness. Inside the car, the phone kept streaming. The tilted screen captured little more than shaky light and fast-moving shadows, but the sound was crystal clear. Every order, every breath, every pause, heavy with the tension of a moment waiting to explode. "Search the vehicle," Maddox ordered, and another officer stepped in, flipping open every compartment, lifting every item. There was nothing. No weapons, no drugs, no signs of any violation. But the search did not stop, as if the absence of guilt itself was reason enough to assert dominance. Naomi was pulled up and shoved into the back seat of the patrol car. The door slammed shut. In the cramped, dark space, she sat straight back against the seat, eyes forward. Even as blood seeped through the collar of her buttoned shirt, there was no trace of pain on her face. Only one thing remained, a gaze that refused to back down. "Do you know resisting a direct order is grounds for arrest?" The officer in the front asked, his tone barely hiding the threat. "I have not resisted anything," Naomi replied, soft but clear. "Your attitude is enough." The accusation dropped into the silence like a pre-written sentence. No law needed, only bias. In the dark, Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second. She was not angry. She did not tremble. But deep in her chest, her heartbeat did not quicken. It stayed in rhythm. Just like in old missions, when she knew she could not use a weapon, could not use her rank, and had only one thing to survive: total control over every reaction. No one in that vehicle knew she had once taught psychological interrogation techniques for NATO's joint forces. No one knew she had trained hundreds of soldiers how to stay calm under siege. They only saw a middle-aged black woman getting arrested in silence and assumed that silence meant surrender. 1 hour later, she was released. No report. No explanation. Maddox's final words as he unlatched the cuffs were, "Next time, do not stand too tall if you don't want to get targeted." She said nothing, just retrieved her phone from the car's dashboard, checked the live stream, successfully uploaded, recording saved. However, when she checked the social platform, Naomi realized the video was not visible to the public. The status read, "This video is under review for potentially sensitive content." Her account had been restricted, not suspended, but the algorithm had automatically suppressed all her posts for the first 24 hours. She knew this was no coincidence. She had read reports of similar cases where videos exposing misconduct by law enforcement were immediately flagged by moderation systems not yet equipped to distinguish truth from provocation in real time. And because she was not famous, did not have thousands of followers, no one had reshared it before it was hidden. But Naomi did not panic. She had already activated auto backup to a server out of state. Even if the world did not see it right away, the truth was alive, saved, and protected. As Naomi drove away, she did not cry, but her hands tightened around the steering wheel. Not out of fear, but because she knew this time they had gone too far, and they had picked the wrong woman to try to scare. This was not a confrontation. It was a silent explosion. Something cracked inside her, not from pain, but because forgiveness had run out. The blood on her forehead would dry. But what happened that night would not disappear. Naomi arrived home close to midnight. She did not turn on the lights. The darkness inside her familiar apartment no longer bothered her. She hung her coat, took out her phone, and backed up the recording again, this time to a hidden hard drive in a locked drawer beneath the bookshelf. Every step was a ritual, calm, precise, repeated like a survival reflex. She washed her face, disinfected the cut with alcohol, applied a small bandage, then sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. On screen appeared a voice analysis program. Naomi began tagging sections of the recording. Every time an officer violated procedure, she marked it in red. Every time she responded according to civil law, she marked it in green. She did not do it to argue. She did it so that anyone watching would see exactly who had crossed the line. Outside her window, the wind picked up. A tree creaked in the front yard. Naomi sat still, hand on the mouse, the screen's glow casting a cold, quiet light across her face. In her mind, it was not rage rising. It was puzzle pieces clicking into place. Everything she had collected, patrol maps, appearance logs, lists of undocumented arrests, now had the final piece. They had come for her. She needed nothing else. No more threats, no more evidence. She knew with what she had, she could do more than sue one officer. She could drag down an entire system built to protect the ones hiding behind the badge. Naomi's apartment in the days that followed no longer felt like a place to rest. It had become a data command center. On the dining table, the sofa, even the wooden floor by the window stacks of documents were arranged in clear sequence. Nothing was out of place. Every note, every audio clip, every photo sat exactly where it belonged, like units awaiting orders. Naomi moved among them like a field commander, reviewing an assault plan. In her ears, there were no helicopter blades or garbled radio chatter, just the hum of the printer, the tap of keys, and the beep of backup confirmations. She wasted no time on outrage. Outrage clouded judgment, and she had long trained herself to keep a cool head while the world burned around her. She knew who she was up against, not just one power-hungry officer, but a system that had grown used to never saying sorry. The first lawsuit form was filled out by hand. Though she could have done it online, Naomi chose ink and paper as a reminder that this was not just a few clicks on a screen. On the first page, she wrote clearly, Plaintiff Naomi M. Brooks, Defendant Royce Maddox, and the Toledo Police Department. Just below that, violation of civil rights, unlawful detention, abuse of authority under color of law, psychological intimidation, and physical assault. She did not write long, did not accuse. She simply laid out facts cold, clear-backed with evidence. Not a single claim without a timestamp, a setting, or supporting documentation. That night, she called Thomas Delaney, a former military attorney who had led a legal team during a joint operation in Afghanistan she once served in. When Thomas picked up, he asked just one question: "Do you need me to assist or to stand beside you?" Naomi did not answer right away. Then she said, "I need someone unafraid to stand alone. But the more who stand, the better." 3 days later, Thomas flew from Washington, D.C. to Toledo. When he stepped into Naomi's apartment, he paused in front of the wall, plastered with diagrams and files. No awe, no praise. He simply opened his laptop, placed it on the table, and began categorizing the evidence by legal type: administrative misconduct, arrest procedure, violations, procedural errors, and signs of coercion. Naomi never took her eyes off the screen. Together, they reviewed all the footage, not just her own incident, but clips from other cases. She had prepared in advance, even comparing audio to official police reports. Any discrepancies were printed, bold, and marked in orange. She did not smile when Thomas nodded. She did not feel triumphant. She only confirmed that everything was aligning. There was no press conference, no social media posts, no hashtags. Naomi did not need sympathy. She only needed one moment to shine a light into corners long hidden. 1 week before the hearing, the file was submitted to the state court and backed up with the Federal Oversight Office. Naomi knew this was bigger than Maddox. She had lived inside rigid systems before, and she knew that for violations to persist this long, there had to be at least 3 layers of protection. But she was not rushing to collapse the entire tower. She moved step by step, name by name, action by action. Not everyone Naomi approached was willing to stand with her. One former military colleague, now a city security advisor, after hearing her out, just shook his head. "I get it, Naomi. I know you're doing this for the right reasons, but I can't. I've got a family." He did not betray her. He simply chose silence. But that silence only made Naomi more certain she was entering a battle no one wanted their name tied to. One witness who had agreed to provide a recording backed out at the last moment, leaving only one message: "I'm sorry. I tried, but I don't have the nerve." Naomi did not blame them. She simply marked the blank space in the witness chart, a gap she would have to cover with her own testimony. She wanted this first trial to be the sharpest blade to cut through the outermost layer. After that, the inner layers would begin to fracture on their own. Throughout the entire preparation, Naomi kept her routine unchanged. She still went out for her morning coffee, still helped a few elderly neighbors fill out insurance paperwork, and still attended the Tuesday night English class for immigrants. But her eyes had changed. No longer the eyes of someone collecting information, but of someone who had chosen her moment to strike back. She knew Maddox was still on duty, not suspended, no summons. Not a single news headline mentioned her lawsuit. She was not surprised, because she understood the system's first instinct is always silence, hoping everything will fade away just like all the times before. But Naomi was not here to stir up chaos. She came to tear apart the illusion of order, and she did not need to shout to be heard. 3 days before the hearing, she received a call from the court office. The clerk asked, "Do you truly want a public hearing, or would you prefer a closed internal review?" Naomi simply replied, "I am here so the truth does not have to wait in line." The clerk paused for a second at her answer. A brief silence, then he confirmed, "We will transfer the case to a public courtroom. Witness summonses will be issued today." Naomi thanked him. She asked nothing more. She knew she had passed the final threshold, and there was no turning back. That evening, she cleared out the room that had been filled with documents for months. Not out of fear, but because she wanted everything clear like a military operation just before the first shot. The east wall marked the timeline of each incident. To the left of her desk was a series of graphs, tracking patterns in the patrol unit's behavior. And above the bookshelf she hung just one thing, her old military ID card. The edges frayed the name Lieutenant Colonel Naomi J. Lawson, fading with time. Not as a reminder of who she once was, but as a message to the system they were facing, someone who had seen truth in the smoke of war and would not bend before the distortions of justice. The next morning she received a message from Thomas. "All supplementary documents have been validated. I will present to the prosecutor's office tomorrow morning. A new volunteer witness has come forward. He used to serve under Maddox." Naomi did not respond right away. She stared at the message for a few seconds, then turned to her calendar. It was time. The final 3 days passed slowly, but not peacefully. Twice she noticed an unfamiliar car parked near her home, headlights aimed directly at her windows before shutting off. Another time, an anonymous caller said, "Just one sentence. You have no idea what you are up against." Naomi did not call the police. She did not save the number. She simply noted the time and kept working. That kind of threat did not shake her. It only convinced her she was on the right path. On the night before, the hearing light rain began to fall. Her small apartment glowed with the soft blue light of a laptop screen, and notes spread across every surface. Thomas sat across from her, eyes red from lack of sleep, still typing furiously. Naomi approached and placed a cup of coffee beside him. "Thanks," he said softly. Then he looked up for the first time in hours and asked, "Are you afraid?" Naomi did not answer right away. She looked out the window where rain clung to the glass like heavy fog. Then she said slowly, "I once leaned down and watched a teammate die under fire because he trusted the wrong person. I did not survive just to stay silent. Am I afraid? Yes. But I am more afraid of reaching the end of my life and asking why I never did anything." Thomas nodded. No one said anything more. At 3 minutes past 12 in the morning, Naomi stood up, closed the case file, and placed each document into a hard shell folder. She did not forget to tuck the military ID into the final sleeve, a token no one would see, but one that carried the soul of the entire case. She carried no weapons, wore no armor, but she was walking into a battlefield where every strike came from the very institution she once swore to protect. And when the countdown timer for the hearing hit its final number, Naomi knew the truth was ready to speak. It did not need permission. It did not need applause. It only needed someone brave enough to stand and not back down. That morning, sunlight spilled gently across the stone steps of Lucas County Court. Security guards made their usual rounds, but their eyes subtly shifted when they saw the black woman approaching in uniform. It was not a new uniform, not sharply pressed like in a military parade, but it was neat enough that no one dared to look past her as if she were ordinary. Naomi walked with steady steps, not fast, not slow. Her heavy coat could not hide her old rank, and she had no intention of hiding it, not to intimidate, not for sympathy, but as a silent message. She once defended this country, and today she was here to defend the values it promised to protect. Inside the courtroom, Maddox was already seated. His eyes flicked toward Naomi as she walked past. There was a flicker of something, but not enough to call it fear. He sat among the defense attorneys, tie straight face, calm but confident. To him, this was still just another hassle, a woman who liked to make things complicated. A game he thought he already knew how to play. The judge was an older woman, gray-haired, low voice, sharp gaze. She opened the session with one short sentence that silenced the entire room. "We are not just trying one man. We are examining how a system responds when power is misused." Naomi did not react. She simply opened her folder and flipped to page 2, already marked with her first witness statement. The hearing began with witnesses called in chronological order: a woman detained for walking the wrong direction, a boy arrested on the street for suspicious behavior, an immigrant held over 24 hours just for not carrying an in-state driver's license. They spoke with hesitation, hands shaking, some in tears. But when they looked down at the front row and saw Naomi's steady gaze, many found their footing again, as if her eyes anchored them to the truth. Then came the fifth witness, a young officer in a semi-formal uniform, visibly nervous. His name was Darren Cole, a former member of Maddox's patrol team. His voice was low, but every word was precise. He spoke of undocumented briefings where superiors urged them to increase presence in black neighborhoods. He recalled being told, "If there's no reason, make one." When asked, "Why speak out now?" Cole did not respond immediately. Then he looked toward Naomi, paused for one breath, and said, "Because I do not want to stay silent forever." The courtroom froze. The defense scrambled. They claimed tense situations required quick officer responses. They said field decisions are subjective and hard to judge later. But Naomi did not respond with emotion. She calmly presented her evidence: audio recordings from personal devices, internal reports that had been altered, and finally a clip no one expected to hear. As the sound played, Maddox's voice clearly saying, "If he did not break the law, make him break it." The room turned to stone. No one moved. Someone in the back put a hand over their mouth. A defense attorney exhaled sharply and bowed their head as if pushed down by invisible weight. Maddox clenched his jaw. For the first time, his eyes broke away. No more confidence, no more smirking, just a long, heavy silence. Naomi sat still, did not turn, did not react. She simply adjusted her collar as if waiting at a strategy debrief, letting her subordinates finish their reports. The light caught her face in a strange way, calm, cold, and commanding. No one dared interrupt. Even those who once thought she was the weakest person in the room could no longer sit comfortably. The judge called a 10-minute recess for the legal panel to verify the clip's source and admissibility. Naomi nodded. No objection. She stood and walked out into the hallway. No one followed. A few reporters took pictures, but no one dared to ask questions. Naomi did not check her phone, did not answer messages. She just leaned against the marble railing and looked down at the traffic below where life continued, as if the historic trial unfolding inside had nothing to do with them. But she knew if she succeeded today, there would be children who no longer had to bow their heads just for being black. Mothers who could finally sleep without waking to sirens. Officers who truly deserved respect, who could rise without being dragged into the dirt by corrupted peers. When the recess bell rang, Naomi turned back. Not too slow, not too fast. She stepped into the courtroom like someone who had already done the hard part, not to win, but to prove that silence was no longer the right answer. She sat back in her seat. Across from her, Maddox could no longer hold the stone-cold expression he wore at the start. He glanced at her, then looked away. Nothing else needed to be said. The audio was clear. The paperwork was in. The charts aligned with testimonies. Every shove, every denial had been exposed. And most importantly, the woman sitting across from them, Naomi, remained silent. No outrage, no tears. She let the truth speak for her. In that moment, the air seemed to freeze. A few people in the courtroom held each other's hands tightly. Some bowed their heads, but no one left, because they understood this was no longer just Naomi's trial. This was a reckoning for an entire system that had grown too used to handling things internally. And for the first time in many years, in the city of Toledo, a black woman did not have to stand outside the courthouse shouting into a megaphone. She walked through the doors alone, with evidence, with intellect, with resolve, and forced the entire system to listen. No more evasions. No more blaming an officer's emotional state. No more repeating. The suspect was acting suspiciously. No more stuffing the file into a storage drawer with the words, "insufficient evidence to prosecute." This time the system had to answer, and Naomi, even as she sat silently, made the entire room understand. Some voices, even when spoken softly, can shake walls. Her expression did not change when the clerk called her to the stand. She did not slow down, nor did she speed up. Each step felt like part of a silent campaign, one that needed no applause. Naomi stood tall. In front of her sat the jury, the public officials and reporters, but her gaze did not waver. The judge instructed, "Please respond briefly and clearly. No personal commentary." She nodded. The opposing attorney's first question rang out. "Why did you record the video?" Naomi did not blink. "Because I understand the power of irrefutable evidence." They kept pressing, "Did you resist law enforcement?" My hands remained on the steering wheel. I made no sudden moves. "Did you raise your voice, challenge them, or interfere in any way?" I simply asked why I was being stopped. The room went quiet at the way she responded, not defending, not complaining, just stating the law, citing what was already on record. Then came a final question that froze the entire gallery. "Why, as a former soldier, did you act as though you were under threat here on American soil?" Naomi did not flinch. She looked directly at the prosecution's bench. "Because I have seen my comrades die, simply because no one recorded the truth. I will not let that happen again, especially when I know I can do something to stop it." The courtroom held its breath. The clerk did not need to prompt her. Naomi pulled a USB drive from her jacket pocket and placed it on the evidence table. The big screen lit up. A video began to play, captured from her phone, mounted under her dashboard. The footage was clear, the car being pulled over, 4 officers stepping out fully armed. One of them, Royce Maddox, gave commands without explaining why. Naomi's voice came through calm. "I have the right to know why I am being stopped." No one replied. What followed made some in the courtroom grip the edges of their seats. An officer opened the door, yanked her out, slammed her to the curb. The sound of her head hitting the concrete. Blood spreading from her forehead. Voices caught on the microphone. "She knows too much already. Let her learn who gives the orders here." And Naomi's voice, faint, still trying. "I am not resisting. I am recording this." But no one stopped. The video ended. No effects, no editing. Just a raw, brutal truth enough to plunge the room into silence. A middle-aged juror, a military medic in his past, cleared his throat, but no one looked up. All eyes were on Naomi, the black woman once labeled a disturbance, now standing as an unshakable wall. The defense lawyer tried to pivot. "Have you considered handling this differently? Filing a complaint instead of escalating the situation?" Naomi looked at him, not angry, not cold, just tired. Tired of answering the same questions asked only to excuse misconduct. "Sir," she said calmly, "if I had filed a complaint, it would have fallen into the same system that enabled those actions. If I had stayed silent, someone else would be next, maybe a teenager who does not know how to live stream, maybe a mother walking her child home. And if we are still here finding ways to justify it, then the real verdict is not in this courtroom." Her words did not need applause, but somewhere eyes began to glisten, not from pity, but because something had been stirred responsibility. An old attorney in the press section scribbled in his notebook, "She didn't raise her voice." The truth raised itself. One by one, the evidence followed cell tower data confirming the timeline medical records. Anonymous testimony even leaked internal memos. No one stood and shouted guilty, but the room itself did. The session did not end with a dramatic verdict. It ended with a shift in the air in the eyes of people who once trusted the system, now wondering how long they had stayed silent in the face of wrong. Naomi stepped down from the stand. No one stopped her. She did not need to lift her chin because she had never lowered it. And as she walked past the row of former officers, she did not look at them. She looked toward the younger faces. She knew this legal battle was not just hers. It was so the next person falsely arrested would not be alone. And the truth once exposed could never be locked away again. A wave of murmurs spread through the courtroom as the video ended. No rebuttals, no debate. Maddox's face slowly lost its once confident edge. Those who had sat beside him now turned away, unwilling to share the gaze of a man whose actions had been laid bare before an entire nation. Naomi sat still, hands resting on her knees, eyes holding no bitterness, only the calm of someone who had waited a long time for a storm to speak for her. Then Maddox was called to the stand. He stood slower than usual, like a hunter who just realized he had become the prey. The prosecutor approached her, voice sharp and uncompromising. "Mr. Maddox, were you aware that this woman once served as a lieutenant colonel in the military's special forces?" The room froze. Maddox flinched, then replied, his voice catching, "If I had known, I would have handled it differently." 6 words, but they shattered every defense he had built. Not because he did not know, but because those words revealed everything. His actions had never come from law nor from duty. They came from prejudice and power. That answer in front of the jury was as damning as any confession. The air grew heavy. A juror stared at Maddox's face, stiff with disappointment. Another wrote notes with a trembling hand. This was no longer about right or wrong. This was betrayal of the badge of the oath to protect justice. Naomi said nothing. She tilted her head slightly as if confirming what she had always known. Truth does not need to rush it, just needs to be protected long enough to speak. The sentencing began. The judge looked across the courtroom, eyes aged by the intensity of the week. "We have heard, we have seen, and we have deliberated," he said. Truth is not always obvious until someone is determined enough to bring it into view. The jury delivered its verdict. Naomi Brooks had won. Maddox was suspended indefinitely. The case was referred to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for expanded inquiry into past incidents. There were no cheers, no celebration. Only a long collective exhale, soft, deep, moving through the rows like a slow tide, as if justice had finally stepped out of a room where it had been locked away too long. Naomi did not exit through the main doors. She did not want interviews. She did not care what would be posted the next morning. All she carried was a small bag with some paperwork and an old photograph of a teammate who had died in a mission years ago. The one who once told her, "If you ever return home and see injustice rising, remember not everyone gets the chance to stop it." Today, Naomi had done exactly that. Not with weapons, not with rank, but with memory, with resolve, and with a silence far more powerful than any scream. The courtroom doors closed behind her, but their echo would not fade easily. And those who once believed the badge could shield them from accountability would now have to look again. Not because she was Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Brooks, but because she was a woman who understood justice only matters when we refuse to stay silent out of fear. 1 week later, the doors of the Internal Oversight Office opened to a newly assigned federal investigation team. Files that had once been put away to keep the peace were brought into the light. Officers from Maddox's unit, once silent, now submitted letters requesting to amend their previous statements. One of them admitted, "I never truly felt like a police officer until I saw her standing there, not yelling, not accusing, just asking the questions that needed to be asked." In an old apartment building not far from the courthouse, Naomi sat adjusting a neighbor's TV antenna. No one mentioned the lawsuit. But the way people looked at her had changed, not because she won, but because she made them believe they did not have to be afraid to walk down their own street anymore. A boy ran up and held out his notebook. Pasted neatly next to a school assignment was a cutout of her photo from the newspaper beside a sentence that read, "Heroes don't need capes. They just need the courage to walk into the truth." Naomi smiled and gently patted the boy's head, and in that moment, she was no longer a witness, no longer a lieutenant colonel, no longer a victim. She was someone who had carved a path through a system once thought untouchable. That evening, Maddox sat alone in his office, staring at his suspension letter and a federal cooperation request. He no longer looked arrogant. He was not angry, just empty-eyed, like someone who had finally realized his entire career had been built on sand. A name that once struck fear throughout the neighborhood had now become a cautionary tale in police training sessions. Do what is right, not because of who stands before you, but because of who you are. And in the sealed report forwarded to higher authorities, one line was underlined: recommend full review of district-level internal oversight with the Naomi Brooks case as a primary reference. She did not write a book. She did not give speeches, but the lesson from her unwavering silence echoed louder than any keynote ever could. The next day, a new sign was posted inside the district police station. Listen before you act. Respect before you suspect. Not everyone is who they appear to be. And at the bottom in bold, never assume you are above reproach just because you carry a badge. 3 weeks after the verdict, in a closed-door hearing before the state Senate, Naomi was invited to testify as a special witness. She sat across from the senators, not as a plaintiff but as a former field commander now restoring order in the heart of a city. "What do you hope will change?" one senator asked. Naomi did not pause. "I do not need anyone to bow and apologize. I just want the law to be enforced regardless of someone's skin color or title when they are staring down the barrel of a gun." That quote was cited in internal memos and later printed in police training manuals. Her name was remembered not because she was a lieutenant colonel, but because she made an entire system reconsider why it existed. Months later, the neighborhood where Naomi lived became more peaceful. Patrols no longer inspired fear, but became opportunities for dialogue. People who had once been wrongfully detained were invited back for case reviews, and the new officers, monitored by an independent committee, began training on unconscious bias led by a nonprofit group. Naomi continued her work as a legal advisor without pay, without awards, but she earned something far more rare: complete trust. Each time someone knocked on her door late at night, not to cry for help, but to ask, "What should I do if I am stopped unfairly?" she knew the fight was not over. But at least people now knew where to begin. One autumn afternoon, as Naomi stood on her porch and wind slipped through the old iron fence, she heard a patrol car stop at the corner. But this time, it was not for an arrest. It was a young officer who stepped out and nodded to her from across the street. She did not answer with words, just nodded back. Just enough for him to understand justice is not a storm, it is a wind. And sometimes just strong enough to change the course of an entire city. From then on, the name Naomi Brooks no longer existed only in court records, but in the memory of a new generation growing up with a different kind of belief that justice does not come from weapons. It comes from those who dare to stand even when no one applauds. A local newspaper in its Unsung Heroes section featured Naomi with a simple headline: "The woman who did not speak much, but made the whole system listen." The story was widely shared not because it was sensational, but because people saw in it something rare: courage that wore no armor, carried no rank, but pulsed in a heart that refused to surrender. As for Maddox, he was officially charged with abuse of power and obstruction of justice. But what kept him up at night was not the verdict, it was Naomi's final words before leaving the courtroom. "You do not need to be afraid of me. Just be afraid of yourself, if one day you no longer know what is right." And from that day on, every time a new rookie officer was assigned to that neighborhood, they were told one thing, not about procedures, but about a woman who once lived at the end of the street. She was not a judge. She was not a senator. But she made the entire system answer. Because truth, when protected at all costs, does not need to shout. It will echo on its own. Just like Naomi Brooks. Some battles happen quietly. No guns, no blood, but they shake louder than any explosion. And sometimes the person behind that seismic shift is a quiet woman walking with nothing but conviction and faith in justice. Naomi Brooks did not rally crowds or demand others take her side. She simply believed in one thing, that truth must be protected and respect should not depend on appearances. Through that quiet strength, a community awakened. People who once believed the law did not stand with them now began to understand justice is not a privilege, it is a right, as long as someone is willing to claim it. Naomi's story is not meant to glorify an individual, but to remind all of us never underestimate someone just because they are quiet. Never assume a small black woman cannot make an entire system look at itself. And never forget that in the moments when injustice feels loudest, choosing not to let go is what makes the difference. If this story moved you even just a little, made you think twice, or feel gratitude for people like Naomi, leave a comment below. Share it with someone. Because maybe, just Maybe it will be the push someone needs when they feel alone in their fight for justice. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We will keep bringing you stories that are real, that are raw, and that just might change the way you see the world. Thank you for listening all the way through. See you next time for a story that touches the heart.